Hello everyone, this is April of 2021 and I just wanted to give a brief update and show you what I'm doing with my maples right now. Of course, it's early spring and most of the maple trees completely have their leaves. They're looking very beautiful. And if you've been following along with my channel, last year I showed a lot of the seedlings that I found in my yard, and I want to show how those have progressed. And then I'm also going to be potting some of those up, increasing their pot size because they've outgrown their original pot. And then I do want to just let you know too, wherever you are in your climate, whenever your maple trees start leafing out, that's about the time that you can also find Japanese maple seedlings under those trees, in mulched areas especially. So we're going to also go around and show you a few of the little maple seedlings in my yard and how I dig those up and plant those in little pots so those can grow and I can have more Japanese maples in my collection. Of course, when you grow from seed or when you find seedlings, they're not necessarily going to be true to the mother plant, but there's going to be a lot of different variation of the leaves and the color and things like that, and even the size of the plant. But in my opinion, that's a lot of fun, and it makes it kind of fun because you don't know what you're going to get. There's a lot of genetic variation. So let's take a quick tour of my Japanese maple seedlings, and if you've watched some of the old videos, which I'll link to in the description, you can see what they used to look like, and here's what they look like now.
So as you can see, there's quite a bit of variation when it comes to the color and the style of the leaves. For instance, this particular one is more lime green with a blushed highlights at the edges of the leaves, and it has very much of a feathered look. Then you have ones like this one that are kind of a brighter red, and then you move over here and these have a more orange tone to them and they have a very strong feather-like leaf. So like I mentioned, when you grow from seed, you'll have a huge amount of genetic variation. Some of these will turn more green as the season moves on, and there will be some, of course, that'll be more spectacular than others, and those I will, of course, set aside and notate. Now I'm moving over to seedlings that are either 2 or 3 seasons old in these gallon pots, and you can see they've grown substantially, and some of these are over 2 feet tall. So they're doing very well. These are in just good standard organic potting soil, and I just make sure and keep them watered. As I mentioned in some of my past videos, you do have to make sure that your seedlings, and really any Japanese maple tree, except for a few varieties, they need to be in a shaded environment to do very well. So I have a nice shade cloth above, and that keeps them shaded. It does let some sunlight through, but it allows them to not get scorched in the summer months.
Now before we go and pot up some of these plants that have outgrown their 4-inch pots, I want to go around and show you what you need to look for if you want to find seedlings, Japanese maple seedlings, in your own yard, or if you have a friend that has a Japanese maple tree that will allow you, or a neighbor that will allow you to pick seedlings from the yard. I'll show you what you need to look for and how you can dig these up and plant them and have your own Japanese maple collection.
So if you look in the mulched areas around where your Japanese maples are, you should see seedlings like this around the same time that your trees are leafing out. You can see that it's getting its first 2 true leaves, and that's of course the really clear indication that these are Japanese maple trees, and of course these will be dug up, and I'll plant this in little pots. You'll notice here there's another one right beside it. Once again, in the mulched areas are really nice because the seeds are able to get the moisture they need, and these particular ones are in the shade, so they're protected from drying out.
So I've pulled some of the strongest and tallest, the ones that have progressed the most from last year, and I'm going to go ahead and pot these up into gallon pots. And those gallon pots will probably last them a couple seasons. I like to move up maybe a little faster than maybe some people do, but I like to move from these little teeny pots to gallon pots after 1 growing season, and I find that that allows the tree to grow the quickest. You put new fresh soil, plant tons of new nutrients for the plants, and in the next season you see huge growth. Including this season, we'll actually see a lot of growth as well. One of the biggest indications you can see that a plant needs to be potted is when the roots start coming out the bottom here. As you can see with this one's telling me that it needs a bigger pot. It will get root bound if you continue to allow it to stay in this little small pot. So I'm going to just show you the process. It's real simple, potting up, you can watch that. and then I'll show you some of the ones that are in gallon pots that I'm moving up to even larger pots. So I got one pot here completely full. I got one pot here that's about half full. And so I'm just going to take this pot that's like half full. I'm going to take this particular plant. I'm just going to very gently loosen up the sides and then try to push slightly from the bottom, and then kind of hopefully the plant kind of pushes out without damaging the root system. You want to do this either now, would be kind of the latest you want to do this, in spring, early spring. You can even do this when the plants are slightly dormant, right before spring. But just protect that as much as possible. I'm going to set that in this particular pot and carefully put potting soil around that. Try to keep the depth of where the stem comes out of the ground to about the same. Don't cover that too much. And then just kind of press that in. Make sure the soil's good. Not compressed too much, but compressed a little bit. And then that should serve that particular maple tree probably through the end of next season. So it'll grow in this season and then through the end of next season in this particular pot, unless it just is an overachiever and it grows really a huge amount. So I'm going to do that for the rest of these, and then I'll show you some of the ones I'm moving up from a gallon pot to a 2 or larger gallon pot. So here you go, these maple seedlings now have their new home in these gallon pots, and that should last them through this season and next season. And like I mentioned, this should help them grow quicker because they'll have access to a lot more nutrients and room for their roots to expand. Let's now move over to a few of the ones that are a couple seasons old, maybe even 3 seasons old, and show you how I'm going to pot those up to an even bigger pot. So I've selected some of the 2 and 3-year-old seedlings, the ones that have thicker stems. So you can see, like this particular one, you can see that it's getting pretty woody and thick. And so that's a good time to plant this one out from a 1-gallon pot to a 2-gallon pot or larger. And so these are just the seedlings that have done the very best. This particular one's not as tall as some of them, but you can see that the stem's getting very woody and decently thick. So I think it's a good time to plant that one up, give it some good fresh soil, and allow it to grow very well. It'll grow a lot this year if I do this. So once again, there's one with a thicker woody stem, and those are what I look for when I'm thinking about potting them up to the next level. So let's pot these up, and so they can do well in the this coming season. So I'm going to pot these up in a very similar way to I did the smaller ones. I'm just going to very carefully squeeze the edges to kind of loosen up that so it's not sticking. I have a pot here, a larger pot that has a teeny bit of soil at the bottom. And then I'm going to just carefully pull on the stem and kind of push on the bottom and hope that comes out, and it did. Came out very nicely. So I can go ahead and put that down in there. Maybe add just a little bit more soil before I do, so the height's good. And make sure the roots, the roots are starting to wrap around, so I think that was a good time. As you can see, the roots were starting to fill this pot up, so I think we're about perfect for potting this up. I'm going to carefully put that down, and then put my soil in around it and just carefully tamp that down. Once again, this pot will probably last it another season. If this one continues to grow quickly, I might pot it up again next year. I pot my plants up maybe more than some people do, moving them up to a bigger pot, maybe even slightly sooner than it may be completely necessary, because I just want to keep my plants healthy and continually expanding and growing. So I like to just be very proactive in that sense. So there's that one. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest, and we'll get back with you in just a minute. So here we are. They're all planted up in their larger pots, ready to continue to grow and turn into full-size trees. These I will go ahead and put under some of my larger maple trees so they'll get some shade and stay protected from being scorched by the sun. As we mentioned, that's really important for Japanese maple trees. They're made to be understory plants and to be in shaded areas so the leaves continue to not be scorched. Beautiful trees. I can't wait till these are full size in several years and to plant these out in the landscape.
So thank you so much for taking a few minutes to follow along with me what I'm doing with my Japanese maples this time of the year in April of 2021. I definitely recommend, if you like Japanese maples, to find a friend or someone you can get permission from to look under their Japanese maple trees to see if you can find some seedlings there, or if you have Japanese maple trees in your yard and you'd like to start a collection of your own, you know, look under the tree. Mulch under it maybe this season, so that next season you'll be able to find some of these seedlings. It's a really fun, inexpensive hobby, and like I said, I really love the genetic variation you get from these, and I really get a lot of joy from nurturing these from a teeny little seedling I found under a tree. And as I planted some of these larger ones up, as you saw today, as we move those forward, I'll get a lot of satisfaction when I plant that tree out in the landscape and it's a beautiful, full-grown Japanese maple tree, and I'll know that I grew that from a little teeny seedling. So once again, just encourage you to get out in the garden, find your seedlings and plant them up and have fun. Thank you so much.